Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lesson. Congratulations, you're at the very end of the Advanced IAM section. You've done really well to get through this section of the course. I know some of these services are not what you'd use in your everyday work, but they're worth a number of points on the exam, so you do well to understand these concepts. So with that, let's review what we've learned in this section of the course. Well, we learned about directory service and its relationship to Active Directory. Now, for the exam, you don't need to know Active Directory in detail, but you should understand it conceptually and how it interacts with these various services. Ultimately, directory service is all about connecting AWS resources with on-premises AD. A very common use case that you'll see on the exam is when you want to use single sign-on to log into any domain-joined EC2 instance. We also learned about AWS-managed Microsoft AD. These are real Active Directory domain controllers running Windows Server running inside AWS. And we learned about AD Trust. This is where you can extend your existing Active Directory to on-premises AD using AD Trust. We'll use AD Trust to extend existing Active Directory inside AWS to your on-premises environment. Now, with these managed services, you'll want to understand where the responsibilities are divided between AWS and you as a customer. So, for example, things like patching, scale-out, user and group management, etc. Next, we covered Simple AD. Now, we referred to Simple AD as the baby brother to Managed Microsoft AD, and it does support a lot of AD-compatible features, but one main feature it does not support are trusts, which means that you can't join Simple AD to your on-premises AD. If you want to do that, you'll need to use AD Connector. This is a directory gateway or proxy for your on-premises AD. Next, we covered Cloud Directory. This is a service for developers looking to work with hierarchical data. And Cloud Directory has nothing to do with Microsoft AD. Another service we covered that also has nothing to do with AD is Cognito User Pools. This is a managed user directory that works with social media identities. So I know it can be a bit confusing because AWS lumps all of these various services together under the title Directory Service, even though they're all distinct services on their own. Some are AD compatible and some are not. So you'll want to go back and review which are AD versus non-AD compatible services. Next, we talked about IAM policies. The most important thing you'll need to understand is an ARN, the Amazon Resource Name. So make sure you understand the syntax because it can get a little complicated. Also understand the structure of an IAM policy. Remember, this is just a JSON document which is composed of a number of discrete statements. Each statement contains an effect, an action, and a resource. So remember, the effect is something like allow or deny. The action is an API call. So for example, get object on S3 or create table on DynamoDB. And that resource is the entity inside AWS that the policy is effective for. So an S3 bucket or a DynamoDB table and so on. Also understand the difference between identity and resource policies and how AWS evaluates policies. So for example, you have two policies that are in effect for the same resource. One has an allow, one has a deny. Always remember that deny supersedes allow. We also covered AWS managed versus customer managed policies. Understand that AWS managed policies can't be edited by you as the customer, and you can create as many customer managed policies as you like. We also talked about permissions boundaries. Remember, permission boundaries don't allow or deny permissions on their own. They simply define the maximum permissions an identity can have. Next, we covered Resource Access Manager. This allows resource sharing between accounts. And this works either on individual accounts or within accounts in an AWS organization. Keep in mind the types of resources that you can share. Remember, not every AWS service is available in Resource Access Manager. Finally, we covered Single Sign-On or SSO. The SSO service helps us centrally manage access to AWS accounts and business applications. So on the exam, you might be presented with a scenario where it's asking about using existing corporate identities to sign into AWS services or third-party applications. So for example, things like G Suite, Office 365, or Salesforce accounts. This is where single sign-on is most appropriate. Anything that asks about using existing identities to log into other contexts, this is where single sign-on works. It can also be used to govern account-level permissions. You might also be asked about SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language. So if you see a question where it says SAML or SAML 2.0, look for single sign-on or SSO in one of the answers. So that's it for this section of the course. You've done really well. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, then please move on to the next section of the course. Thanks.